Chapter 1. The Only Parent I Knew. For as long as I can remember, it was just me and Dad. Our house was small but clean. The walls were filled with pictures of just the two of us. Fishing trips, birthdays, school plays. He wasn't the warmest man, not one for hugs or bedtime stories, but he was always there. Solid. Reliable. Quiet. I'd ask about her, my mom, every now and then when I was little. Especially during Mother's Day crafts in elementary school. I still remember gluing paper flowers to a card and asking Dad if we could take it to the cemetery. His eyes had gone glassy. He crouched next to me, ruffled my hair, and said, "Your mother would have loved that. She died giving birth to you. But she loved you. More than anything. That was all I ever got." He didn't talk about her often. Just those rare moments when a movie or scent brought back something he couldn't quite hide. I learned not to ask. Over time, the questions became whispers in my own head. Quiet, respectful. I didn't want to hurt him. He raised me well. He worked as a mechanic, always came home with oil-streaked hands and stories about difficult clients. He never dated. Said he didn't have time for it. When I was 12, I found a photo in an old drawer. A woman with dark curly hair holding a baby. No name on the back. I asked him about it. "That's you and your mom," he said quickly, grabbing it and slipping it into his wallet. I never saw the photo again. I convinced myself that it was enough. That she loved me. That she was gone, but somehow still part of me. But deep down, something never sat quite right. As I grew older, little details would pop up. Documents with redacted information. My birth certificate with a hospital I wasn't born in. I asked once about grandparents. He said they were gone too. "Just me and you, kid," he'd always say. We got each other. And I believed him. When I met Rachel, everything changed. She made the world feel warmer. We met at university, she studied psychology, and I couldn't stop staring at her in ethics class. We dated 4 years before I proposed. Dad liked her. He wasn't expressive, but he said she had good eyes and a steady walk. That was his way of giving a blessing. We planned a small wedding. Garden ceremony. Just 50 guests. Rachel's family handled most of the arrangements. I focused on Dad, getting him fitted for a suit, trying to make him comfortable around so many new people. He said he was proud of me. He didn't say it often. The day of the wedding was warm and bright. Butterflies and jazz music. Soft laughter echoing across white chairs and champagne flutes. And then it happened. 5 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, Rachel's cousin came rushing toward me, holding a small gift box. "Hey," she said breathlessly. "Someone dropped this off at the welcome table. Said it was for you. No name, just, from someone who loved you first." I smiled. Thought maybe it was from Dad. Or Rachel. I opened the box. Inside was a photograph. That same woman from the drawer. Dark curls. But this time, not holding a baby. Standing beside a hospital bed, holding a small boy with his cheeks pressed to her shoulder. It was me. And beneath the photo was a folded note. "You deserve to know the truth, Mom." I stood there, heartbeat climbing into my throat, as guests began to rise from their chairs. And then I saw her. She wasn't sitting in the crowd. She was standing behind the last row. Quiet. Watching me. The woman from the photo. And she wasn't dead. Chapter 2. The woman in the garden. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stood there, watching me, as if she had every right to be there. At first, I didn't believe it. My mind tried to file her into some other category. Maybe she was a distant relative. Maybe she just looked like the woman from that photo. It had been years since I'd seen it anyway. Memories lie. Grief distorts. Right. But the moment our eyes met, I felt it. Something primal. A recognition my body understood even before my mind did. She took one step forward, slow and deliberate. My hands were shaking. I could hear the wedding music begin to swell. Rachel was about to walk down the aisle. And here I was, paralyzed, staring at a ghost who wasn't supposed to exist. I moved. Instinctively. Away from the ceremony, around the hedge, toward the back where she waited. When I reached her, my voice caught in my throat. I didn't even know what to ask. She spoke first. "You look so much like your father," she said softly. Her voice wasn't what I expected. Chapter 3. The Confrontation. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The room was still dim, golden light just beginning to touch the sheer curtains. Rachel stirred once beside me, murmuring my name, then drifted back into sleep. I sat at the edge of the bed, still dressed in yesterday's shirt, the envelope from Anna on the nightstand. I'd barely slept. I watched the sun rise over the city, my mind crawling with questions. One above all, why? Why had he done it? By the time I pulled into my father's driveway, my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I hadn't called ahead. I didn't want him to have time to prepare. The house looked the same as it always had, white paint slightly cracked, front porch sagging at the edges. It was the same place I'd ridden my first bike, scraped my knee, celebrated birthdays. Familiar. And now, suddenly alien. He answered the door in his robe, surprised. "Hey, bud," he said, smiling. "Didn't expect you this early. Shouldn't you be off on your honeymoon?" "I need to talk," I said. Something in my tone changed his posture. He stepped aside silently, letting me in. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where he taught me long division, where he once told me Mom had gone to heaven when I was born. I placed the envelope on the table. He looked at it, then at me. "What's that?" "You tell me," I said quietly. He hesitated, then reached out, hands slower than I'd ever seen them. He opened it. He didn't react right away. He didn't gasp or jump up in outrage. Just stared. "So," I said. She was telling the truth. He folded the papers again, sat back, closed his eyes. "I always knew this day might come," he said softly. "That's it." I snapped. "You lied to me my entire life. You told me she died. You made me grieve a woman who was alive." "Why?" He didn't look at me. "Because I was scared. I was angry. I didn't trust her, and I was losing everything." "You kidnapped me," I said. "That's what the report says." He flinched. "I didn't think of it like that. I thought I was protecting you." "From what?" My voice rose. "From a woman who wrote me birthday cards every year? Who stood at the back of my graduation? Who came to my wedding just to see me?" He looked old suddenly, smaller than I'd ever seen him. "You don't know what she was like back then," he muttered. "We were in a war. Divorce wasn't civil. She said things, did things. I didn't trust the court to protect you. So I left. I thought I could do better." "So you erased her from my life?" He met my eyes then. His own were bloodshot. "I didn't want to share you. That broke something in me." "She's my mother," I said. "You had no right." He stood shaky. "I know." Silence stretched between us. Thick. Irreparable. I picked up the envelope and stood to leave. At the door, I turned back. "She's not the ghost you made her out to be," I said. "She's real. And I'm going to get to know her." He didn't stop me. As I stepped back into the sunlight, I realized something chilling. The man I'd admired all my life, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, was a stranger. And now, I had to decide what kind of son I wanted to be from here on. Chapter 4. Her side of the story. I met her the next evening, just outside of town, in a quiet cafe that seemed trapped in the early 2000s, wooden booths, humming neon lights. The smell of coffee burned slightly too long. Anna was already there, sitting by the window, hands folded in front of her. She looked both fragile and collected, like a porcelain teacup that had somehow survived a dozen earthquakes. As I approached, she stood slowly, giving me a nervous smile. "You came," she said, almost like she didn't expect me to. "I had to," I replied. We sat across from each other. I wasn't sure what to say at first. All the questions I'd rehearsed on the drive there vanished as I looked at her. This woman whose face was hauntingly familiar, whose eyes mirrored my own. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. I gave a bitter laugh. "That makes two of us." She reached into her purse and slid a small bundle of letters across the table. Some were faded, some still sealed. "These were for you. I wrote one every year. Birthdays, graduations, Milestones. I didn't know if you'd ever see them, but I couldn't let the years pass in silence. I picked up one envelope, postmarked from years ago, and opened it. Inside was a letter written in steady cursive. She described how much she missed me, how she'd driven past schools on the off chance she'd see me playing, how every time the phone rang, she hoped it was someone calling to say they'd found me. Tears welled in my eyes. "Why didn't you come for me sooner?" I asked. "Why didn't you fight harder?" She exhaled sharply. "I did. You have no idea how many courts I went to, how many doors slammed in my face. Your father moved constantly. New addresses, new schools. Every time I got close, he disappeared again." I leaned back, stunned. "He told me you were Epilogue, the space between us." 3 weeks passed. The wedding photos were still on my desk, still untouched. Half of them felt like they belonged to someone else. A smiling groom unaware of the shadow walking through the doors. A father with a forced grin. A missing mother in the crowd. After that night in the cafe, Anna and I kept meeting. Slowly, cautiously. We talked over coffee, shared old stories. Sometimes it felt natural, almost like we had some invisible thread pulling us together. Other times, I wanted to scream. At her. At myself. At the time we'd lost. I didn't tell my father right away. But the day came. I drove to his house, sat in the driveway for 20 minutes, and finally walked in. He was sitting in the living room, TV on mute, drink in hand. He looked older. Smaller somehow. "You knew she was alive," I said without preamble. He looked up, eyes glassy. "You talked to her?" I nodded. "She's not what you said she was." He didn't argue. Didn't deny. He just stared at the wall like it held answers he could never give me. "She left," he said after a long pause. "You were barely a week old. She was sick. She couldn't hold you without crying. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. So you made me believe she was dead?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "I thought I was protecting you. Maybe I was protecting myself. You took her letters." His silence was the answer. I stood for a long time, unsure whether to yell or cry. In the end, I did neither. I just said, "You don't get to play the victim in this story." He looked at me with a hollow kind of regret. I walked out and didn't look back. That night, I called Anna. Told her I'd like to come by the next day. When I arrived, she was on the porch, holding a small photo album. Inside were pictures I'd never seen. Me in a tiny onesie, her holding me in the hospital, notes scribbled in the margins. "Everything I could keep," she said. We sat together and flipped through the pages. There was silence, but it wasn't the cold kind. It was the kind full of space. Space for grief, for anger, for understanding. I realized then, love isn't always clean. It isn't always immediate. Sometimes it's buried beneath years of silence, waiting to be dug out. I may never fully understand why it all happened. I may never forgive my father completely. But I could move forward. And maybe, just maybe, I could begin again with a woman I never got the chance to call Mom.